Thanks for joining us for Financial Risk and Funds Verification in International Admissions. I am Cheryl Darrett-Boychuk, Director of Institutional Relations at INTCAS US. INTCAS stands for Intelligent Communities Around Students. We help colleges, universities, and boarding schools attract, recruit, and manage international students in a safe, compliant, and efficient way. We've been operating in the UK for the past 5 years, and I've been hired to launch INTCAS in the US. As some of you may know, in June 2016, INTCAS acquired Funds V, a company I founded in 2009 to improve the efficiency and integrity of the process for international student applicants to prove financial capacity. Our programmers have been busy integrating that functionality into our much broader Incas ecosystem. So let's talk about this issue of funds verification and financial risk. Unfortunately, we've seen a number of cases of fraud in our field, namely in the form of data manipulation on academic or financial documents. Earlier this year, the PI News reported that fraud is a growing problem due to both the sheer increase in scale and the diversification of international student mobility, and the rewards from committing fraud often far outweigh the risk. The point is, there's a problem in the industry and we can do better for the sake of our bona fide students, their financial sponsors, our institutions, and frankly for tighter security around global student mobility. So let's address the source of the problem. INTCAS conducted thorough research over the past 5 years on international student mobility. We cited several major outcomes related to the macro variables that impact global student mobility. Out of these 6 macro variables, 2 of them pose the most potent financial risks. Let's see if you can guess which 2 as we dig a little deeper. We'll work in reverse order, starting with the academic life cycle. Of course, parents play a critical role early on. And as we witness a pretty remarkable growth in the middle class in certain pockets of the world, it's clear that those 4 factors on the right directly impact a parent's choices for their children's academic life cycle. Operational efficiency is a pretty important variable. You'll find happy applicants when your staff reaches out to them on a regular basis via multiple channels. On the other end of the spectrum, we see unsatisfied applicants when your correspondence is antiquated and inconsistent. No surprises here on strategic pricing. We've got happy students when the academic experience is perceived as a great value relative to the price. Not so much on the other end of the scale. We've broken down brand positioning according to what we call heritage on the x-axis, which can be negatively embryonic or positively mature. Digital presence appears on the y-axis, moving along from frontier on the negative end to potent on the positive end of the spectrum. Now, these next 2 variables are the most important when addressing financial risk. From a geographical perspective, the green areas represent relatively stable economies and political infrastructures. Red represents less stability, and of course yellow, or as my British colleagues like to call it, amber, lies somewhere in the middle. Now this socioeconomic pyramid is where it really gets interesting when it comes to analyzing financial risk in international admissions. The high income group represents only 5% of the market. The middle income group registers at 45%, and the broadest portion of the pyramid, the low income group, makes up about half of the entire international student market spread across the globe. We found that a majority of host universities cater to the MIGs in the middle. When we dug deeper, we saw that just a few geographical areas within that 45% are involved in repetitive financial fraud. So it's prudent for us to study the financial risk factors for that particular 45% of the market. The decision-making process of this 45% can be broken down even further. Through our research, we came across 64 sub-variables, broadly categorized under 6 umbrella variables: academic, immigration, finance, employability, brand equity, and culture. So the third most important variable in a family's decision-making process about where to study abroad across the entire international student market involves finance and its associated risks. It's tough to know exactly how much money is spent on global student mobility, but I think we can all agree that the monetary value is not insignificant. In the United States alone, authorities estimate that international students contributed about $31 billion to the economy last year. So the question is legitimate. Where is all that money coming from? Nearly two-thirds of international students are funded by friends and families. That source seems a little fuzzier than the alternatives of the host campus in the U.S. or the home campus or government. And therein lies the biggest challenge, authenticating those sources that originate with friends and family. So INTCAS has developed a multi-level solution to mitigate financial risk on behalf of all the players involved in global student mobility. The Incas Ecosystem is a powerful, independent platform that unites the global education sector by enabling education institutions from around the world to work with host governments, agents, and students to manage the entire admissions process from inquiry through to application, visa management, and enrollment. We've been promoting a culture of excellence and self-regulation to develop a fair and transparent approach to enabling the mobility of students in a safe and compliant manner. We have an entire array of services which facilitate the process of seamlessly connecting the right student to the right institution. For our purposes here, we'll focus on the Due Diligence Cloud, the Escrow Cloud, and the Verification Cloud. Let's start with due diligence. Simply put, this service helps you get to know your applicant better. We search more than 9 billion records from around the world to build a profile of the student and their sponsor. Our proprietary algorithms yield results relating to negative media searches, politically exposed persons, and sanction list databases. We also check for publicly recorded financial fraud as well. Ultimately, INTCAS warns of potentially negative applications which could damage the reputation of the education institution. Here's how it works. Once the institution opts for the due diligence check, INTCAS will request that the students submit a few documents. In the vast majority of cases, the results reveal clean records or a green light to move ahead with the application. In case of yellow, we would involve other colleagues from the Fraud Detection Unit, Director of Finance Operations, Legal Counsel, or Quality Control. These authorities will then make a joint decision and create a report with their recommendation whether to admit the student or not. A red flag denotes a negative report, where we would recommend against proceeding with the application. However, the final decision lies with the institutions. Let's take a closer look at INTCAS's due diligence report. In addition to the basic contact information of the applicant, we also include the personally identifiable details that serve as the source that drives our due diligence. You'll see the acronym PEP a few times in the report. That stands for Politically Exposed Persons. Next, let's look at our escrow cloud, which addresses a few scenarios. What if you recruit a student and he or she does not report for classes? Not only do you lose that student, but there's also an opportunity cost, as another qualified student could have taken that spot. So how does the escrow cloud work? We plug into a global banking infrastructure coordinated with leading financial institutions around the world. We establish an escrow account for each student who resides in mid to high-risk jurisdictions. The objective is to secure 100% of the first-year tuition and living expenses. Evidence of those funds is provided from one of the world's top 50 prime banks through our ecosystem. This not only minimizes the financial risk of the education institutions, but it also streamlines the visa decision-making process. Institutions can generate admissions letters once the funds are deposited in the escrow account. Students can submit these account details while applying for their student visa, which minimizes the risk of visa refusal due to financial reasons. The escrow cloud protects the students as well. It is insured by INTCAS Fee Protection Scheme, which means INTCAS assures students, families, and sponsors that making such a payment to any institution through INTCAS is underwritten by a AAA-rated insurance policy. INTCAS's escrow cloud also features a reference statement that will be shared with the institutions as well as the students once we have the entire amount in the escrow account. Every individual student will have a unique bank account code and number, which they submit as part of their visa documentation. This ensures that the institutions have their tuition and fees secured, which minimizes financial risk and any opportunity for fraudulent activities. The verification cloud represents the third component of how INTCAS addresses financial risk. Now, authenticating financial documents is pretty similar to authenticating academic credentials. World Education Services, of course, is a major credential evaluator. They recently published a paper, How to Obtain Authentic International Academic Credentials, where they declare, in no uncertain terms, documents that students have touched are generally considered not official. A transcript is official if it is received directly from the issuing institution, in many cases by an approved electronic means. That's how INTCAS's verification cloud treats financial documentation. Here's another way to look at it, complements of this scale adapted from Educational Credential Evaluators, better known as ECE. Electronic verification of data is the most secure. The international education industry will eventually arrive at the greenest stage, where host campuses and host government agencies will receive direct confirmation from the educational institution in the case of academic transcripts, or from the financial institution for funds verification in response to a request from the authorities over a secure electronic network. Here's how INTCAS's verification cloud works. The education institution alerts the student of the requirement to prove financial capacity. The applicants and their sponsors may review a list of more than 4,000 banks within our network. If their banks are within that network, then through a secure platform, the student or sponsor grants permission for INTCAS to capture transaction data from the past 90 days, essentially improving the efficiency and integrity of the process that has been traditionally paper-based with ample opportunity to manipulate. In the end, INTCAS generates a funds verification certificate for the institutions. Facilitating the fight against fraud is one of our primary goals. We address this first with identity authentication. INTCAS employs the most robust security and privacy methods used by the world's leading banks, informed by Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering guidelines. We enable users to enter their account credentials just as they would to access their account at the bank's portal online. This approach serves to authenticate the user's identity, and the user is always in charge of restricting access to their data at any time. The second important feature, detection of duplicate access. There may be a legitimate reason for one bank account to be accessed more than once, such as two siblings pinging their parents' account. So we don't automatically disable any profiles. We simply alert both the student and the institution and provide a comment section for the student to explain any irregularities. Lastly, multiple balance verifications. In just a few minutes, bank account holders from any of the 4,000 banks in our network may refresh their 90-day balance histories within their INTCAS profiles, enabling qualified students and their parents or sponsors to substantiate their financial capacity over time. INTCAS keeps a historical record each time a student submits their completed profile to their authorized host institution, so the admissions counselor can pretty easily see if there's a steady stream of income or if the proverbial red flags pop up for one reason or another. After all the checks are completed in a satisfactory way, INTCAS generates a verification certificate for the institutions, which of course can be kept within the student's file. So we just wanted to give you a very brief overview of INTCAS's capabilities as they relate to due diligence, escrow, and verification clouds. Do let us know if we can schedule an in-person meeting at one of the upcoming events around the country. To continue the conversation about funds verification and financial risk in international admissions, or about INTCAS in general, just #AskINTCAS via Twitter. Or of course, you can reach me the old-fashioned way by email. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your week.